Party with your host, Dustin Rybka.
Hello and welcome to Sex Party. I'm your host, Dustin Rybka. With me on the show this week is Jenay Leger. Jenay is the host of the My Naked Mindest Podcast. Jenay and I talk in this episode about the worst thing to ever happen to her on a date. It's pretty fucking shitty. We also talk about why everyone should have at least one strip of red LED lights in their bedroom, the importance of having a good hoe phase and what it taught her, and why dads really know how to fuck. So let's get you over to the interview. Without further ado, this is my conversation with Jenay Leger.
This week's conversation.
Jenay Leger, welcome to Sex Party. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, well, you and I just went through some technical issues. All the podcasters out there will empathize with us about how difficult these tech issues can be in the podcast world. It's just something that we have to go through. Other than that, I'm great.
Good shit. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here too. For the people who don't have any clue what's happening, which is, you know, the whole audience, right? Can you talk a little bit to them and myself about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I am Jenay Leger. Like you mentioned, I am the host of My Naked Mindest Podcast. Started back in April of 2021. So I've been podcasting for about 2 years now. My podcast and what I love talking about is all just taboo topics. Anything that people don't normally talk about, I like to talk about and dissect. And yeah, it's super fun. And dog mom. And yeah, here I am.
So My Naked Mindest. Okay, walk me through how like the process was for starting that. Why'd you pick that name? How much did you have like ready to go? When did it hit you? And were you like worried about what it was going to be like to launch a podcast? Because I like, you know, and they've heard this and they're like, all right, dude, shut up. But like with Sex Party, I had it and I sat on it for like a year and a half. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. So it's funny. I actually did kind of similar story as you. I actually went on 20 first dates in 2019. And I actually wrote all of them in my notes on my phone, just like something about the date, you know, the guy's name, just something, if something weird happened or they talked about something weird. And I had all this like data and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do with this? Bounce ideas off my friends. I was like, am I going to write a book? I'm actually still kind of writing a book, but I was like, I kind of want to do a podcast. And I listened to so many podcasts and I said, Jenay, just freaking go for it. So like I said, gathered all that information, honestly wrote just like so many notes and ideas and topics. And I really gathered just so much information, probably about like 6 months to a year. And then I finally was like, bought the microphone, bought all the things, and then finally just kind of went for it. I didn't really like necessarily have too much behind me. I kind of just went week by week and recorded. And I also have guests on my podcast. So it was something that I kind of had to like keep up with at first, but now I'm like very like months ahead. I like to keep it that way, but you know, as we know, podcasters, it doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes you have to whip something up real quick, but yeah, that's kind of like my origin story. And the name, I found that to be one of the hardest parts because I know that I wanted it to be like about, you know, sex, obviously. And the word naked, I was so hesitant on because I was like, is that too inappropriate? Is that too, I don't know. I thought that people would think like, oh my God, naked. Like, what is it about? So it was tough, and then I kind of just said My Naked Mindest. And I was like, ooh, I kind of like that. But I wrote like a bunch of other names that I literally laugh at now because they're so ridiculous.
Okay, so name one or two. What are some of the other names?
Okay, so my nickname is Jazzy. Like Jazzy Jenay May is my Instagram name. And it's been like that since MySpace, literally MySpace days. And one of them was like Jazzy with Jenay or like Pillow Talks with Jenay. And I was like, that's so terrible thinking about it now.
Yeah. No, and what's crazy is everyone, and I don't know, I'm not shitting on anyone, but there are a few podcasts that have pillow talk in the title. And so, yeah.
Glad I didn't do it.
But yeah, right. And then you have to compete and like whatever. And it's like, okay, I'm confused. There's pillow talk with this person and pillow talk. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So did you think that you thought the word naked would harm, or was it just weird? Or did you think that it would help? Because with me, with sex party, I'm like, holy shit, what a fucking raunchy thing to do. And that's why I did it. Cause I thought, you know what? It works. Raunchy works. And like, there's a whole meaning behind it for myself too. So it was just one of those things where I was like, I have to just kind of embrace it. So like naked, at first you thought it was going to hurt. And then how did that work?
Yeah, I kind of was like, is that going to be like, some of the people at my work have like no idea that I have this podcast, like my personal world. I kind of try to keep that separate. Like my close coworker friends know about my podcast, but I was like really hesitant on the word naked. And I honestly don't know why. I thought it was like, I thought about using another word instead of naked. And then the word mindset, I don't remember what they were at this moment, but yeah, I was really hesitant. But you know what? I look back and I'm like, I'm glad I did naked.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is really powerful. And it's also like incredibly, I mean, there's nothing more vulnerable than being naked. So like, that's a whole thing, right?
That's very true.
Yeah. And so the word itself is very vulnerable because you think naked and it's like, we all get different, depending on which context, right?
Totally.
But I think that probably helps your show because it sounds like if you're talking about like taboo things, like what's more vulnerable than that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I love it.
And so you went, okay, I love this. You went on 20 first dates with 20 different people.
Correct.
Talk about that a little. Was that something you had set out to do originally? I'm going to do 20. I'm going to write about it. Was that the goal, or did that just happen and you happened to write about it? Like set the whole thing up.
Yeah, so it kind of just happened that way. You know, I was on the dating apps looking for my man, and you know, I just ran into some very interesting people and ran into very interesting things that they said or stories that they told. And yeah, I actually got stood up once, which I was very offended by. I was like, wow, you're really just going to stand me. Like I was literally at the date for 30 minutes and he did not ever text me back saying he was on the way. And I was like, fuck that guy. And then I found him on Bumble like a couple months later and I called his ass out. He didn't really like it. But anywho, yeah, I kind of just, I went on so many dates. And then in 2020, I found my fiance now. So that was a whole other thing. But yeah, it was quite an experience.
Yeah. I mean, so what, if you can give some away, right? Like what are some of the more memorable, and when I say memorable, I mean like fucking weird experiences that you had, that you wrote about, and that you probably still can't believe now? I mean, what stands out? Like, is there one in particular that's like, okay, this was the one that was like,
There is one that stands out. So one of the guys I went out with, this is the most fucked up story. So I went on 5 dates with him, like in a very short, like 2-week time span. And, you know, looking back, I saw all the red flags, but I kind of just was like, you know what, we'll see how it goes. So we went out on his boat for the day. I kind of realized later that he liked to drink alcohol, and a lot of it. You know, I have my drinks here and there, but we were like we had to go back to our houses. So I only had 2. He had a lot. He ended up smacking me in the face at the end of the date. So I was very, very thrown off by that. That was the worst.
Okay. Well, sorry about the domestic violence. That's fucking terrible.
It was fucked.
So you're on a boat. This man's been drinking was there an altercation that led to it, or he just smacked you? Was he trying to be cute, or is he just a fucking idiot? Like, what the fuck's going on?
So I was in my car saying goodbye to him. Like I was sitting in my driver's side, and my window always like glitched up and down, and he thought that I was like messing with him or something. So he just like decided to slap me in the face. That's my interpretation. I really don't know anything besides that, but it was very, very messed up. That's probably my most remarkable one.
Oh God. Yeah. Did you file charges? Did you run over his feet? What was the protocol? This is fucked.
I know. Honestly, I just was like, what the fuck? I was just so thrown off because I've never experienced that. And obviously that's a good thing. I have empathy for folks who go through that type of stuff. But yeah, I honestly just like drove away, and I was so glad that my gut was telling me don't drive with him and drive yourself. And I am so glad that I did that, because then I would have had to get in a car with him, or honestly, I probably would have taken an Uber, but it was just not a good experience, obviously. And then I just pieced out, and I was like, I blocked him. I was like, this is not for me.
Can you give his address so we can all hunt him down and make him pay for that? Jesus Christ. Well, I mean, this is something that there is no excuse for, right? Like, it doesn't matter how much anything, right? All of this is like, violence is, unless you're in some sort of consenting, like, you like to be like playfully this or that, you can't, like, there's no excuse. There's no, to me personally, like, there's like no redemption for that. From that, So when that happens, that had been what, the fifth date, I'm assuming. Well, that was the fifth and final date. Well, how did you feel initially? And what did you write about it in your notes?
Yeah. So originally I was like, did that really just happen? Like, I drove away and I instantly was like, holy shit, he just slapped my face. And yeah, I was just like, I think I called my best friend and I was just like, this just happened. And she was like, what? And what did I write in my notes? I'm actually trying to find them because now I'm curious.
Oh man.
I kind of think that might have been the year previous, now that I think about it. Maybe. I don't know. I can't find his name.
Well, either way, worst date ever. That's fucked up.
Worst date ever.
Yeah, and I'm sorry you had to deal with that. We're both like giggling about it, but it's not fucking funny at all. Yeah. But like, that's how some people process the horrific shit. Like,
exactly.
What else are we supposed to do? And so, whether or not that was part of like the initial 20 dates, will that story be in your book when you write it?
Absolutely. Yeah. That will be, yes.
Yeah. And you said there were like hints, obviously, over the course. Like,
there was some red flags that I was kind of like brushing under the rug, and like, he just drank a lot, and I have an alcoholic father. Like, I know how that is. It's tough, but it's just something that I wasn't okay with.
Have you talked about this experience on your podcast?
I have.
Yeah. What's the feedback been like?
Everyone that I've ever told this story to is like, their mouth just drops. It's like, holy fuck. Like, if he did that to you on a fifth date, imagine what it would have been like years in, or whatever. Time is just, it's just time. And if he did that now, who knows what would have happened.
That is so insane. That is, again, sorry that happened to you. Please drag the shit out of him in the book, and continuously on the podcast. So these 20 first dates, that sort of sparked the idea for the podcast. So when you started the show, were you just talking about your experience on these dates, and then you're like, okay, now I'm going to move more into just general like taboo subjects, or like, how was there an evolution there?
Good question. So honestly, that was kind of my inspiration for the podcast, but I knew that I wanted to start like interviewing people. And then it kind of became like a holy shit. Like, I've always loved talking about sex. It's something that, ever since I started having sex, I was like, it's just my favorite topic to talk about. So I knew that I wanted to have experts and coaches and authors and all these different sorts of people that comes from all walks of life on the podcast. So I kind of think like that was my inspiration, but now it's kind of just like evolved into something that I really never really could have expected, but I'm like so glad of where it is now.
Yeah, I think with podcasting, it's so unpredictable and in the best way possible. I think that
Mm-hmm.
when you offer yourself up as a host or as a guest, and I try to just stay as much of myself. Like, that's my trick, is that I just try to be the maniac person that I am in real life. Like, behind the microphone, behind the camera, behind the camera. And geez, wow, guys, it's not even Monday. It's fucking Tuesday, and I'm just like flubbing everything here. But that, to me, that's the trick. And I think it can be difficult to do that. Are you talking about yourself and your vulnerabilities and your naked mindset on your show a lot? Because I've done that on this show, but I've kind of pulled back from it a little bit because I sort of want it to be more about the guests. And I think potentially we'll get back to my stuff at some point. But I feel like with your show, being that vulnerable, you've been doing it longer than I have, and how much of your vulnerabilities and things that maybe are taboo for you, or you're scared to talk about openly, have you embraced, or have you kind of not done that?
Yeah, I would say I'm definitely vulnerable on my podcast. I think, if I can share like if someone's telling a story and I can add to it with an experience I've absolutely do that. I do every once in a while do some solo episodes, so I'll kind of break down something or share an experience. So I would say kind of both, but it's definitely something to just kind of be like, hey, here's all my shit. This is me.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to like not have edits. Not that I try for no edits, but I just feel like, oh, this was sad, or that was sad, or there was this glitch here, or whatever. I usually choose just leave that shit in there, because I think that makes it more vulnerable too. And vulnerability is funny, because it's like there is strength in it. But you don't even get to that until after you're willing to kind of like go there. Have there been guests on your show where things have come up and you're like, oh, I could totally comment on that, but I'm not going to because I'm terrified, right? Like, have you had those moments happen?
I definitely have. Or it's like, I kind of want it to be about them, and I'm like, some topics, I'm like, you know what, Jenay, just let them have the show and just kind of ask them questions about their experience.
Yeah. Well, when I asked you what some of your favorite topics were to talk about, like, and normally, like, you're seeing it as it is, and you are seeing this interview, or listening to this interview as it is. But Jenay and I have messaged on Instagram what topics, whatever, and some of your favorites right off the top. One of your favorites to talk about, and maybe you're talking about this on your show, but like how to keep it spicy in the bedroom. Like when you said that, did you mean in a situation, maybe a long-term relationship where like the spark has started to fade? What are we talking about when you're talking about keeping it spicy in the bedroom?
Yeah, I would say in a long-term relationship, maybe not even when something starts to die down, but maybe you kind of do the same sex every time, or maybe you do some different positions, but you're like, I want to just do something different. And that's one of the topics that I literally love talking about.
Why do you love talking about that one so much?
So I love talking about it because I find that, like, I obviously have my own thoughts of how to spice things up, but every time I usually have a sex intimacy coach on my podcast, I ask them the same question and I always get a different answer, which I think is super fun, because then I can kind of collectively add those all to my pleasure chest, quote unquote, and try new things with my fiance.
Okay. And so how many of those things have you, like, give me some tangible things that you've heard from experts on your show to keep it spicy in the bedroom?
Yeah. So one of the things that I kind of, when I interviewed this woman, she said, you should do this. So I will share it with your audience. So creating a sex bucket list. So that's basically you can do it with your partner, or you could do it separately and then kind of bring your list together and then like really write down which ones you guys are willing to do together. But it can be a super fun, easy tool to do. It can be different places. It can be different positions. I mean, the list is endless. So that's something that I think is super fun, and it kind of sparks your imagination a little bit. And like, okay, where do we want to have sex? We want to have sex in a dressing room. Okay, cool. We want to have sex in all 50 states. It can just be anything. So I love that one. And another one of my favorites that another intimacy coach told me, and I actually bought them because it was the best thing ever, is getting LED lights and putting them around like your headboard. And so, I mean, you can get them at like Best Buy, but they like change colors. It usually comes with a little remote or an app on your phone. So like the red light is like a super crazy vibe for me and my fiance. Like when we have that red light on, it's like, holy fuck, shit is going to go down tonight. Or the purple one might be a little bit more like sultry and like romantic. So that's probably one of my favorite tools that I tell people if they need to have that little zhuzh in their life, in their sex life, to get LED lights.
Well, we are all about the red light special, and on this show. In my life, actually, like over this way, no one can see it, thank God, because it's like is the bedroom area of my apartment, and I have like LED lights throughout, right? But there is like a corner where it's a strip and it's in a thing. It's like that red light for me is the best for intimacy. And just for like being horny and like whatever, even just for like watching a movie, right? Like that red light will do amazing things. But if you turn on the red light, you get the red light special going, and you start to like get it on with whomever or even yourself, like there's something different about being in the red and having that. So I totally agree. From my time in nightlife, I can tell you that if you replace the light bulb in the women's bathroom with a red light bulb, your female guests will stay 40 to 60% longer. That's like a straight up scientific fact. There's just something about that color that is so, I mean, how many songs have been written, that are like horny about the color red? I mean, I just That's named true. One, so it's like, there is something about the red light special, and so I love that. Back to the bucket list though, because I can't let you get away that easy. Did you do that with your partner? Did you guys both write out lists separately and bring them together?
We did. So I said, okay, we are going to go, and we did it in a restaurant, which was kind of like fun because we were like talking about sex, and then every time the waiter came over, it was almost like that like anticipation, are we going to get caught like talking about dirty things? So yes, he brought his list, I brought my list, and then we combined the list. And it was super fun, just like kind of seeing what his fantasies are, seeing what my fantasies are. Like, it was such a fun experience to do. And I highly recommend trying it out with your partner.
So was this at a fancy restaurant or like an all-you-can-eat buffet?
So it was actually like a little like pub bar, I guess you could say. But yeah, it was fun.
And so were you surprised at some of the things that were on his list?
I would say I was a little bit surprised. I'm trying to think of one of them off the top of my head, but I think I was more like, oh, okay, we want to do the same thing. Like, it's like we were so in tune with our list. Like, I've never had sex in a car, which is very fucking weird. I know, very strange. So that's something that I really, really want to do. Easy too, not even difficult.
Well, yeah, I mean, like it depends objectively, right? Like,
true. That's true.
Having sex in the car is easy. Anyone can go do that, right? But the actual mechanics can be a little difficult. Yeah, I've had sex in a car a lot. Actually, now that I've had some really crazy experiences in automobiles. But it is not designed, at least whatever. You sort of need a van or a bus, right? Which there's tons of porn about that. Google is your friend on that one. But so so what was something on his list that maybe, because I feel like this could go many different ways, right? Like if you like, okay, here we go. And it's like, you trade lists and it's like, what's this thing about SeaWorld, right? Or like, what do you mean have sex with each other's friends? Like it could be,
That's
if you're being honest, this could
That
go
is-
totally fucking sideways.
Yeah. Okay. So I just pulled up the list because we did it
Perfect.
like a couple months ago. So
This is great.
one of the ones on his list was at a concert, which I was like, ooh, that could be really fun. And then, of course, you kind of get your mind going about like, where at this concert? Are we going to do it like in a big crowd or like in the bathroom or like in a hidden area? So that one was fun. And then another one was on a dock, like on a lake, which we're going camping this weekend. So I'm like, maybe that'll happen.
Okay. So how many were on there? Like how many would you suggest to put on their list? And like,
ooh, I would say anywhere from like 10 to 15. I think that's like a good number.
yeah, that's a good start, right? Once you blow through those, you never know what you're going to discover. Maybe you want to like, oh, on a dock, let's try a boat, right?
Right. Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
I actually had sex on one of those like paddle boat things, which is super weird now that I'm remembering that. Yeah.
That's fun.
I was 19, so whatever. Yeah. It was fun, but we definitely almost drowned. So,
oh gosh,
yeah.
Did you almost tip it because all the weight?
Totally. And like you're moving around and shit or whatever. Did you guys knock through? Did you guys knock like a bunch of items off your list like right away then, or was it a slow burn?
Yeah, I'd say we're still working on it. I mean,
did you have sex in a car?
Not yet. I have given him many blowjobs in a car though, so I don't know if that. Not really. We have not done that yet, but we have done it on a golf course, and that was on the list. But we want to do it again because it was really fun.
That is so funny. Like this keeps coming up on this show, and actually, like one of the people that I had sex in a pretty wild sexual experience in a car with. I actually have a couple experiences with her on a golf course, and that too was kind of rocky. That was kind of like difficult because you're trying to find where, right? And it was like, okay, what time is it? People start to golf early, right? The grass is like super wet. You have to take these things. You have to take these things into account, like in a car, it's like, where are the seatbelt things, the cup holders? Does the seat move forward? Oh no, that one's broken. You know what I mean? So there are things to consider. So, okay, 10 or 15 items, a piece. I feel like that's great because then they can, and then you're combining. So then it's like one master list.
Yeah, totally.
The concert one, did you guys pull it off at the concert or no?
So funny enough, we're actually going to 2 concerts this summer. So I'm like, it's going to happen. We got to do it.
Is there a plan, or is there like wherever you can figure it out? Or
I kind of think wherever we can figure it out. It's going to happen.
Yeah, these are the things you do when you're a sex podcaster. Because like now I'm starting to get the question like, have you ever been to a sex party? And I'm like, well, you know what? I do host a show called Sex Party. Maybe I should start attending more of these events, reporting back, kind of a thing. But that's you're living again with the vulnerability, like you're living what you're talking about, right? And so
absolutely,
yeah. And I think you kind of have to do that if you want the show to continue in the right energy,
Absolutely.
And some of the other topics that you were passionate about, foreplay was another one. And this one is, I don't want to say it's not controversial, right? It's not difficult. But there's something about foreplay that I just don't think people are grasping, and I feel like it's obviously it's like probably like 70-30 or 80-20, like us males are like fucking this up, but in general I feel like people don't give enough kind of credit to foreplay, and like how it not only like gets you going, right, but like how much of it is a good amount of foreplay. So let's talk about foreplay.
Yeah. Ooh. So I think foreplay is often very sped up. I don't even know.
I mean, it does, at this
Sped
point,
up.
the rules are out of the. We just, yeah, it's definitely sped, but you don't have to
Sped
say.
up. It sounds
Yeah.
weird. I don't know why. But I find that, yeah, things are rushed. Things are like, oh my God, well, let's just have sex. And a lot of my other sex podcaster friends and intimacy coaches, we've all talked about this, is really slowing down, slow the process down, feel the senses, like be gentle, be rough. I mean, depending on what you're into, but just really taking your time, because that person will be like, feeling good, feeling the pleasure, like, oh wow, they're touching my neck and they're licking my neck, and just like being really intentional with the whole process. And also not neglecting, if I guess the foreplay leads to oral, not neglecting the clit or the head of the penis. I feel like those are two things that are often very much overlooked.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the sped up version of like just trying to get to intercourse, right? Like immediately. And I think even like the conversation needs to be slowed down, right? Because
Yeah.
we're just like, and I don't mean like podcasting about it, but when you're with someone or multiple people or whomever, like conversation is your best friend. And there's just something that I think people feel awkward about, like starting the foreplay or starting the conversation or being the first. And I think that's such a, there is no foreplay without conversation, and there's no sex without foreplay, right? So it's like a chain of command, right? It's like a chain of custody. And I just think that is that something that you would agree with, that it's like people not only need to slow down like with the foreplay, but like slow down and fucking talk to your person or persons.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just like feeling connected, because I think there's something to be said about if you just like make out and you just start the penetration versus slowing it down, having nice foreplay, like warming up the woman or getting, the penis hard. Like, I just think it can be so 0 to 100 real quick. And I find that it's just like, yeah, just being intentional and really being able to be in the moment, I guess you could say.
Where do you think that's coming from? Why is it because of too much fucking TikTok or too much Red Bull or like what's going on? Like, why are we so fast? Why are we trying to get to the penetration?
That is a good question. I feel like, I mean, and maybe it is time, like maybe some people have children and they're rushing because they're like, oh, we only have 5 minutes to fuck. But I think, and I could go into a whole rant about like scheduling sex and making that sexy. But I find that, yeah, maybe it is time. Maybe it's, oh, I want to get this over with. Or maybe it's, maybe we're on our phones too much and we're like, oh, I need to get back to doing XYZ. But I think setting time aside and making sure that you have how much ever time you want or need to be able to have that experience and to connect and be intimate is just really, really important.
I mean, is there anything more important than that in a relationship that's physical? I mean, because there's not, you don't just get to, like A to C is really not something that you would even really want to do. And people, I think it's this weird thing. I think that I know we're not taught, and we talk about this all the time. And you said like scheduling and making that sexy, and like that shouldn't even be something that we have to make sexy, right? That should just be something that like, oh, like, hey, let's fuck Wednesday. And I remember being in relationships where I'm like, oh, it's just so abrasive, and it just doesn't. And we talked about it many times on the show, but like these are things that it's almost like a trick or like I don't want to say a trap, but like it almost feels as though these items have been like kind of pushed out of our realm of like understanding with sex.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
So how do you make that, all of that being said, how do you make scheduling sex sexy? If we have to, how do we do it in your opinion?
So I think really, because think about it, we set time aside for everything else in life, right? Like I set time aside for, hanging out with my friends. I guess I'm a planner. I put everything in my calendar. So setting time aside for hanging out with my friends, maybe date night. But in that date night, you could say, hey, we are going to have this in our calendar. I mean, I don't have children, so I can't really relate to, the parents out there, but I just know so many of my girlfriends, they really struggle with setting time aside. Oh my gosh. For intimacy with their partner. And I think really just being able to say, okay, we are going to, on Thursday night, we are going to set an hour and a half and just have it be us. And also, I think that gives you the opportunity to say, okay, well, how could I make this really fun for us? Like maybe I'll whip out my new lube. Maybe I will use my new toy. Like being able to create the experience and make it really fun and maybe something new for you, and just kind of being able to be really present in the moment. Okay, we have this time aside for us, and kind of just making it an experience. I think that's kind of a good way to explain like how to make scheduled sex sexy.
Yeah, or you could each have a red light, right? And then when the red light's on, like that person's horny and or I don't know, like trying to be creative about it in my little sarcastic way, which not sarcastic bad, but like I'm a fan of red lights too. So like I think having some way of, if you can't schedule it, if you can't bring yourself to say, hey, this should be our date night, or you can disguise it as whatever. Like there should be some other kind of like emoji that you send that's like, I'm feeling, which is really corny now that I'm saying it out loud. Like, hey, every time you get the dolphin emoji, it means, or whatever. But
I like that.
There should be some sort of indicator for people that maybe can't like come right out with it, because I've been in those relationships where I'm very vocal, or maybe even sometimes where I don't feel like talking about it or telling someone or this or that or the other to sort of communicate, because as intuitive as people can be and as smart and like in sync, there could still be circumstances that come up. Oh, I thought this, or you go to touch somebody and they kind of move and you think, okay, they're not into, like, there's these little things that people become like passive aggressive. Communication is everything. Again, we always come across this, and we're coming across it a lot in your episode, but all of everything that we're suggesting is just communication, right?
100%.
From the red lights to the dumbass emojis. It's about like asking for what you want or communicating what you want. How much is that coming up on your show? Because on this one, it's like the most important thing I think that how do you have amazing sex? You fucking talk about it first, right? So is that happening on your show too? Are all your experts agreeing on that?
Oh, 100%. That's like one of the biggest topics. Like when I ask like, oh, what is a way to, what is a way if someone is struggling with talking about it? Like how can they make it more comfortable? And I think, I'm obviously very open about talking about sex. So I try to put myself in a person's shoes where they're not comfortable talking about it. And it can be, it's so important. And it can be through text messages. It could be like if you're so nervous to talk about it in person. And I think also what it comes down to is never talking about it in the bedroom. You should be like somewhere else that you are not having, like the room that you're usually having sex in. Like don't do it in the bedroom. Don't do it in the bed. You do it in the car. You could talk about it in the car and during dinner when you're watching TV, but in the act and in the bedroom is not the best place to have said conversation about sex.
Wow, that's actually pretty profound. I think I'm not sure if I've had anyone say that before. Why do you think that is? Because it then normalizes talking about sex in other places, or?
So it's usually like, so say you're having sex, right? And then you finish, you're laying in bed and you're like, you say to your partner, oh, I really didn't like when you did XYZ. So it kind of has like a bad, kind of like a bad taste in their mouth, right? So you're like, wow, we just had sex. So that's one thing. And then another thing is, just because it's like in the place that you just had it, it's just like I can't explain how the sex podcasters that I've talked with this about, they basically are like, have a conversation. If it's brought up, it's brought up. If it's, maybe you're talking about intimacy and you're like, and I always say this on my show, I say, blame it on me. Say, I was listening to Jenay's podcast and they were talking about communicating about sex and I really, really want to try XYZ. So just kind of being able to bring it up somehow. And if you're nervous to do that, I always say, blame it on me. But yeah, I find that, it makes sense just because like, I don't know, if you're in the moment, you want to say good things about the experience, I think is another way to put it too. Like, oh, I really, really liked when you did XYZ. And maybe you didn't like something that they did, but focusing on the positive and not the negative.
Yeah, we've definitely discussed that and the powers of like starting a conversation with a positive versus, not starting with a negative because it's complainy. And it does. There does need to be like some sort of way to talk about it in the fucking laundry room or like you said at dinner, wherever,
Right.
because sex shouldn't be that strange. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, we have to be sort of like, I guess, understanding of like people's sensitivities and all of that, like, and
Totally.
so one of the other things that I think does or does not come from all of that is we were, again, you and I were messaging before about, things you like talking about. And one of the things on your little list of 3 or 4 things was how important having a hoe phase was for you and like what it taught you. And so this has come up on the show, I would say, recently in the last couple episodes quite a bit. We've had someone like talk about how to have a hoe phase, and so we love a good hoe phase.
Hell yeah.
And so like, why was yours important? And how long did it last? When was it? Did you have multiple hoe phases throughout your life? Let's hoe phase it up.
Love it. Let's do it. So I would say mine was probably 2020. Oh, wait. 2020. Oh my God. 2012. Wow. That just really took me a second. 2012, 2013 was probably my hoe phase. And I would say it really taught me what I really like and what I really don't like. And I think being aware and be like looking back on it, like, oh wow, like I really had great sex with that person, but then this person was so aggressive and I wasn't ready for it and blah, blah, blah. Just really being able to explore new bodies. And I don't mean that in like a crazy way. I just mean it in the fact of like, yeah, like I want to explore different people because at the end of the day, like I'm going to be with one person for the rest of my life. And if I didn't get to experience, the other people that I slept with, I would always in the back of my mind wonder, oh, well, what is sex like with this person? What is sex like with this person? And I think with every single person also, which I think is fun, is you might do something to one person and then the next person might be like, absolutely not. I fucking hate that. Like I had a man that my ex-boyfriend that didn't like his balls played with at all. He was like, do not touch them. I do not want you to even look at them. Like he did not like anything. And, other men like love that. So that was just one example that I was like, oh, wow, like this is super interesting. And that's just like one small example. But I find that I really got to know what I really, really like and things that I'm like, maybe I'm not really into that.
See, and so what I call this over here in Sex Partyville, sex party land, whatever, on this show is everyone's body, everyone's mind has a different algorithm, right? And that's on you to ask, and because you have one too, and it's so like if you're gonna try and like sync those up for 10 minutes, or if you're gonna try and have a night, if you're going to try to have a life with that algorithm, right, you need to really, again, like with the communication. So you were discovering that in your hoe phase that the communication was clutch. And so here you are, podcaster, with having experts on and talking to me about how important communication is. There's the through line, everybody. We can all go home. Not yet. But I think besides the guy who didn't want you to even look, did he really say, I don't want you to look at my balls?
I mean, I might have been over exaggerating a little bit, but he definitely did not like me to touch them at all.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. Well, to each their own, right? We can't knock people for what they like or what they don't like. What are some of the other things? Like, are there particular moments from your hoe phase that stand out above the others? Are there good memories? Are there bad memories? Are there things where you're like, wow, if I wouldn't have done that, because you said that was sort of like the concept of a hoe phase, but now let's like really break into your hoe phase. Like, give us a couple tangible items where you're like, this was really fun, this crazy shit I did, but this other thing, maybe not.
So I would say there's definitely some things that I was like, ooh, this wasn't good. Like a guy like stopped me mid fuck when I was on top, and he like was like panting like a dog, and I was like, what is going on? Like, and then it like didn't continue. It just like stopped. I was like, okay, maybe it's hot in here, whatever. And then the second time we had sex, he did the same thing. And I was like, okay, this is like really weird. So stuff like that.
Did you ask him what he was doing?
You know what? I don't know if I think I said like, are you okay? And I didn't really get a true answer of like why we stopped. I really don't know. I'm like, were you not able to come? Like, I know sometimes men go through that, which is fine.
Sure.
But yeah, I never got a real answer. And this was like, I feel like this was a long time ago. So if it was now, you best believe it would have been like, hey, what's going on here?
But the panting like a dog part, I think, is what's throwing me.
Yeah, it was like he was so out of breath and he like couldn't catch his breath. And I was like, but it was like a long period of time where I was like,
okay,
you good, bro? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
I would say we've had our fair share of one night stands. I mean, they're usually not very good. I've had a few good ones.
Why do you think that is, that one night stands are not that great? Because this is another item that's fun.
Yeah, I would say because, I mean, you don't maybe know each other too well. You know, it's usually maybe you're just really horny and you just kind of fuck and then that's it.
Yeah.
I would say it's more like, it's definitely quick normally, I would say. Maybe there might be alcohol involved. You're having a good night. You're like, ooh, this guy's hot, whatever. And I would say, yeah, there's not much communication, even though there should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny that as humans, well, maybe just in our minds, right? For some of us, and then for others in the tangible, real world too, is like we crave a bit of variety, especially I think men more so than women, but I think everybody craves a bit of variety. Again, I'm not speaking for anyone. This is just my firing squad sort of opinion on the human race. And so we sort of crave this variety, stimulation stuff, like, oh, I wonder what this person's like in bed, or that person, or da. Like, we can't stop that in our heads. But then once we actually maybe act on that, most of the time, because of the lack of communication, it turns out to be kind of like a fucking dud, and it takes you a while, I think, to realize that.
Totally. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's what was one of the realizations from your hoe phase. Okay, so what are some of your best experiences from your hoe phase?
Ooh, my best. Older, not old men, but older men know how to fuck. That's what I'll say. That's my experiences. Dads also know how to put it down, from my experiences. I'm trying to think what else.
Were you you were fucking more than one dad? There was multiple dads in this equation for the whole face?
I'd say yes,
okay.
but not at the same time. Different times. Different
well, yeah,
times.
okay. Well, that wasn't a question, but I'm glad you cleared it up. Because I would have been like, okay, wait a minute, was this like a dad party?
Yeah, right.
yeah. Because that, again, valid thing. Some people really like the dad shit, and like, was it your friends' dads, or was it just dads and a couple dads in general?
No, that would be interesting. I wish, but no, it was just a dad, a couple, like, I don't know, 10 years older than me.
Okay. So the 10-year age divide going upwards, right? Dads know how to fuck. Okay. We love that.
I can't believe I just said that a lot. I don't think I've ever said that, by the way.
Well,
it's like a
welcome
exclusive to sex party.
Yeah. It tends to happen quite a bit on the show. I just think that, I mean, it's a party, so stuff's going to fucking slip out.
Party.
Exactly. So your best experiences, you learn that older gentlemen dads, right, that are good in bed. What else did we learn that was positive?
I would say I learned that like maybe some little things that I like my hair being pulled, and maybe like a slight choking, not too aggressive. And then other guys I've learned, this one guy was like really into ear stuff. So like he really liked being like having his ear licked, and like he literally like got off on it. And I was like, oh, well, this is kind of easy. Like, cool. I'm trying to think what else.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to a hoe phase. I mean, I've had multiple hoe phases. I think my whole life is probably a hoe phase, to be honest. But I'm in a committed relationship now. It's amazing. But I think, and it's funny because I was having this conversation with my girlfriend not that long ago about how, I'm in my 40s now, and without all of the fucking hoeing around that I did, which was a ton of it, right? Without that, and also without like having relationships that didn't work, the one that I'm in now would be not possible almost, I think.
Yeah. And I also find that when you get to, like, I always think about certain people who maybe married their high school sweetheart, and granted, that is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, I always am thankful that I didn't get to do that, because I always think to myself, those people probably I wonder what else is out there, because they've only fucked one person. It's just the truth.
And again, your brain is like, imagine and so I can remember having like a first. I remember like the first time that I did anal with someone. I remember the first time that I had sex without a condom. I remember the first time I got it like really good head, right? In those moments, I'm with this person or people or whatever it is. And I remember thinking, I can't wait to do this with everyone. You know what I mean? And at multiple of those experiences, I was in a relationship, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. So like, when you have sex for the first time, whether it's good or bad, and you're like married, I mean, that's what a fucking nightmare that would be.
Oh, I don't know how people do it. I truly don't. Like, what if you have sex with your husband for the first time and you're like, that was trash? But you probably don't obviously know, but there's going to be some chemistry.
Yeah, I think when something is trash, like it really has like a scent and a feel of trash. And I think that there's like, I think it's like a twist ending in a horror movie. You finally get the person, and it's like, oh, I love you so much, and it's like, wait, now I'm stuck with you in this hellhole forever, and our sex sucks. Not a great experience at all. I think that's probably why the people at least that I know of, more in the celebrity realm, because everybody remember like Jessica Simpson was like, married one, it lasted like 6 months or something, and then they're like, but that's everybody I know, I think, has gotten divorced, I think, after a little while. Some people hang in there longer, but who the fuck wants to do that?
Right.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
wild.
So in closing, it's a question I always like sort of reword it, but we'll give you the space scenario. So you're about to be shot into space. I don't know where you're going. They're going to shoot you into space. Goodbye to the human race, right? You can leave one piece of advice on sex and relationships, and these are your final words to humanity, right? I'm making it very, very dramatic for you today. What would they be?
Advice. Okay. I would say always be your authentic self. Communicate with integrity, and always, I was going to say always have good sex, but like that's really generic. This is actually a really hard question, but I like it.
It's very difficult.
Always have sex and enjoy yourself when you're doing it. Spice it up. Keep it spicy. That's what it is. Keep it spicy.
Keep it spicy. Jenay Leger, thank you so much for being on Sex Party and putting up with the ridiculous yet valuable questions, right? Where can people find you? Where can people find the podcast? Where can they subscribe?
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. This was a freaking blast.
Of course.
You can find me on My Naked Mindset on all of your social media. I'm also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where you can find podcasts.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, we will be talking very, very soon. I think potentially, looking into the future, depending on when they're listening to this, I may have already been a guest on your show. They'll have to just go check it out.
Hell yeah.
Who knows? Awesome. Well, we will talk soon.
Thank you.
Big thank you to my guest, Jenay Leger, for being on the show with me this week. Go check out her show, My Naked Mindset. Show her some love. Show her some support everywhere you find podcasts. If you want to show this show, show this show. If you want to show this show, we said it again. If you want to show this show some love and some support, and you're listening on platforms like Apple, Spotify, you could subscribe to the show. That is the most important. You could also leave a rating. You could leave a review. You can tell your friends and your family, preferably at family functions. Listen to Sex Party, watch Sex Party. Don't say anything else, just walk away. If you're watching on YouTube, wow, dude, oh. If you're watching on YouTube, I love you, I see you. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to the channel. That's the most important. You could also leave a comment. You could also like all of the videos on the page. It's up to you. You don't have to do shit. I love you if you do. Thank you guys for supporting Sex Party. You could find me in the DMs on Instagram. And as always, I will see you guys back here next week.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter @SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin @Dustin Rybka.